Welcome to the Founder Factor, where we'll dig into the strategies, ideas, and mindsets of some of South Carolina's most impactful entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Caroline Jennings, and if you're looking for your next business breakthrough, then you've come to the right place. Today on the show, we are joined by Lelia King, who is the Executive Director at Build Carolina. Welcome to the show, Lelia.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, great to see you.
You too.
I figured we could start this off by just having you give us a little description of what you do at Build Carolina, what it's all about.
Yeah. Build Carolina is a nonprofit organization that really is all about the tech talent ecosystem. That's what we would call it. So what it has become is really an incubator of programs that each have something to do with getting more opportunities for more people to enter into technical careers.
Gotcha. So is it mainly employer-facing, employee-facing, both?
So we've got a couple of different really training programs right now, targeting learners and people who really want to enter into the industry for the first time. So we've got 3 programs. One is called Carolina Code School. That is a kind of standard coding bootcamp model. It's an in-person, adult, immersive, full-time program for folks who really want to transition into a career as a software developer. We also have a program called SC Codes, which is a statewide program in South Carolina that provides free coding education for anyone who wants to learn. It's a really cool program. And then we've piloted a new fellowship program this year that is really trying to fill that gap between education and work. So for those who have finished either a degree program, a certificate program, and are ready to take that jump into the workforce, but just there's still a few things missing. Maybe they've never really worked in a professional environment. There's a few of those professional skills, soft skills still missing a little bit. And then really, a lot of people will learn a skill like coding, but they may not understand kind of the bigger picture around how do you build a product? How do you build software? How do you deal with clients? So Develop Carolina is the name of our fellowship program. That is a 6-month program to help fill that gap.
Gotcha. So how did you get into this? Do you have a development background?
I do not. And I would say that I did not plan to be entrepreneurial or, start something new, and certainly not in tech. So it's something I kind of fell into. My story is that my background is PR, communications, marketing. And it just so happened that along the way, I started working for a company that was in the coding education space. And I really fell in love with the stories of the people I talked to who were doing that work. So when a company closed and I was trying to figure out what I would do next, it really just became, am I going to say yes to an opportunity to try something that I've never done before? And that's how I found myself here.
Very cool. So how do you use your communications background in what you do now?
Yeah, I don't think that any other training or experience could have prepared me better than communications, because, so much of the work that I do is figuring stuff out and researching and talking to people and asking questions. And so coming from kind of almost a journalism background and learning how to work with clients in communication settings really helped prepare me, to kind of figure stuff out and not be afraid to just ask questions and say, I've never done this before, but you have. Can you tell me your story and give me your advice? So I really think it helped a lot in the fact that I have to be such a generalist at this point, and just kind of figure stuff out all the time.
Yeah. So when you first started out, did you have a team of people that you started these programs with, or were you kind of the one that was hiring or piecing all the parts together?
Yeah, great question. At times it felt, kind of quiet and lonely, and at other times I realized that no, there's a huge community of support around me. When we first started, there were 3 people who had really formed kind of as a founding board, had formed this idea. None of those people were going to actually run with it. They hired me to run with it. And there were probably the first two hiring decisions were not mine, but really after that, everything kind of decision-wise has been. We, as a nonprofit, we have a board of directors and we have a technical advisory committee, and we've really gathered a lot of support, a lot of kind of partnerships and people who, are invested in and interested in this mission of getting more people into tech. And so today we're about 4.5 years in to this project.
Wow, and you have so many programs already.
Yeah.
I mean, in just 4.5 years, that's incredible.
That's the thing. It really has grown into something that is so much bigger than what we first thought it would be. When I originally said, yes, sure, I will figure it out, kind of go with this idea around a nonprofit coding school. That's really, it was a narrow focus. That's really what we thought this was going to be. But then, really kind of opening up just our eyes to see the opportunities that were available and listening and responding to market need, to employer need. That's what helped us, figure out what is Build Carolina really here to do, because we think it's more than just, one of these programs. We think we can help kind of incubate, support, grow several different kinds of programs.
Well, clearly you've tapped into an important need if you found all those different branches to get into.
It's kind of a weird intersection between education, which we all know is changing drastically, the education industry, higher ed, K-12 as well, and the intersection of technology and where we are in Greenville, South Carolina, and the needs of the employers that are here, the employers that are trying to come here, the people that want to move here, and then nonprofit. We're sort of at the edge of that world. And so being able to see this bigger picture and pull together kind of all these different little pieces, that's really what's fun for me, to kind of think about all of those things a little differently and not be married to any of those one industries, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I something that you said a couple minutes ago really stood out to me, which is that the business looks very different today than it did starting out, and than you could have ever expected it to look like. Has your role morphed significantly since you first started? And walk me through what looks different now with your job, opposed to what you maybe expected your job would look like when you first began.
When we first started Build Carolina, we were sort of mirroring a known kind of model of a coding school. And I saw my role a little bit like a campus director and, operations and just kind of some known models. And as we started talking to, these statewide entities and figuring out some of our kind of the need and some of the programs that we wanted to create, my role shifted into just a lot more broad than that. Not really being able to stay in the day-to-day operations and also kind of student support for a code school, but really kind of taking it up a level and being able to be the one that's looking at, we call it an ecosystem now, but looking at the big picture of where are there gaps when it comes to how people are getting into training programs, educational programs, getting into companies, getting into opportunities. So that became a lot more than managing a campus or running a program, kind of program director role, and really became, I am now an executive director, which is a little bit better match for what that role looks like. But I think that's really where the kind of innovative thinking, being creative, figuring stuff out, but also you got to know how to put together a budget and hire people.
Right, that stuff doesn't just go away.
Right. So it's a fairly all-encompassing role now. But as it grew, I got more and more, excited, more and more passionate about not just my role, but really about what this organization could be. And we continue to uncover that there really are very few organizations that are similar to this. And it's kind of a special thing that South Carolina is has and is doing.
Yeah, I haven't heard of anything else like this.
Me neither.
So you mentioned creativity was a big part of your role. You also said that what I call figure it out-ofness is a big part of your role. That's not how you phrased it, but that's my rewording. Can you give me an example of what that might look like in your day-to-day?
Yeah. Right now, take staffing, hiring staffing and planning for all of these different programs, for example. So in all three of these programs, even though they're quite separate in some ways, they have some of the same needs in other ways. So I think about this a lot and how to creatively kind of put people in positions to have an impact on several different programs, or when is it important to have a person kind of focus deeply on one program or one, one side of the business, or one, like instructors, for example. Got one instructor who is full-time focused on the code school because they really need that. But I have to be creative in thinking about when we have needs, when we have other needs for instructors, how do we staff that? When do you make these decisions to go from, contractors to full-time employees? How far out, how far in advance do you need to be? How sure of your funding coming in do you need to be in order to make some of those moves? Because it can be a little bit of chicken and egg. And I think there's plenty of models out there and books you can read on how to do this, but nothing really compares to just trying things and seeing what works, and really what works for us, and what we're doing, and the makeup of our team. I've tried hard to not let myself kind of get into the world of imposter syndrome and thinking, I was not trained to do a lot of the things that I'm doing today. Trying not to fall into that too much and trying to lean into this is an organization and our team has built to be what we want it to be and mirrors our values, and we do things in ways that make us feel really good about our work. And that may not look the same as the way that other companies do things.
Exactly. Oh man, I relate a lot to that imposter syndrome comment, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners do as well. Do you have any strategies that you use for overcoming that day to day?
Yeah, we talk about it a lot in kind of the software development world and the career changer world. And that's where we sit every day, is helping people as they kind of navigate career change. And is this something that I might be good at? How do I know if this is something I would enjoy? And then as you're learning any new skill, of course, anything new that you've not done before, you might get to a place where you're 1 or 2 years into doing that thing and you still have some of those questions, those thoughts, and then those thoughts really can make you become a different person, or the thoughts that you have can kind of control who you become. So when it comes to imposter syndrome, we talk a lot with our students about having sort of the ability to take a step back, have sort of that intellectual conversation with themselves about this is what's expected. This is my skill level. This is what I am still learning. I can ask for help, but none of that means that I am dumb or I can't do what I set out to do. I can't reach my goals. So it's hard because it's a mindset shift. And one of the things that I've really found to be refreshing about not just software development, but tech in general, is at least here locally and across our state, we have so many people who are supportive of new people coming into the industry, of people who are, super transparent about their career shift and saying, I don't know everything about this, but I am going to take a leap of faith, believe in myself, and try something new. The folks who are in the industry here have just been so helpful, supportive, and they've made a lot of opportunities for folks to come in and continue to learn while on the job, while doing projects. in ways that make it really a supportive environment and not a situation where imposter syndrome would, automatically creep in and where you would get into a situation and feel like, I don't know what I'm doing and I have no one to talk to.
Right.
So it's been just nice to know that support is out there. And even though I am not a developer, I'm not a programmer, I'm just around these folks all the time. And it's been a really kind of a cool industry to be part of in that way. Just so supportive. And yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by Designly, South Carolina's top-rated app development company, and Word of Web, your partner in smarter website strategy and design. Well, it seems like that apprenticeship type model is becoming more and more popular these days. You might not be ready to hire a new developer if you're a big firm that needs someone more senior, but you have to train people up. And I think that the state more broadly, we have that responsibility as well.
Yeah, and that brings up a really interesting point that we talk about a lot at Build Carolina, which is whose responsibility is it to educate folks and to train folks to be ready for the future of work and the jobs that are here today, much less the jobs that are going to be available in the future. I think the answer to that is unclear. I would argue it's partially all of our responsibility, but certainly a mix of kind of public-private partnership, education, industry as a whole certainly plays a huge role. But technology is moving at a pace that is nearly impossible to keep up with from an education standpoint. And so in this very unique time where we sit, where technology is just not stopping, not slowing down, and education's having a hard time keeping up, that's where organizations like Build Carolina and programs like ours can kind of help fill those gaps, maybe for the short term. Maybe we will all kind of figure out what is a better kind of systemic solution to this problem that we're facing in a talent gap. But it's a systemic issue. And so there's not one silver bullet that's going to fix this. It's really going to take kind of a shift in thinking, how do we approach training and education programs for this industry, even defining what does technology mean?
Great point.
But, that aside, getting people ready for kind of the future of work and what does work look like in 10, 20 years, much less 50 years from now. It's a pretty big problem that if, the state, thankfully, is showing that they're invested in figuring this out by supporting programs like SC Codes. Our city is showing that it's invested in trying to help figure some of this stuff out. Our employers are saying that as well. So it's sort of taking this third party in Build Carolina. And again, it's nice that we can be a nonprofit. We're super transparent, that we can sort of bring all of those different parties to the table and say, let's try some stuff and see what really works well to fill specific talent needs and specific gaps in this ecosystem. And by doing so, we'll start to chip away at this more systemic issue.
I love the way you phrased that. It's almost like you're pulling different threads to kind of see what has the biggest impact. Because as you said, it is a very multifaceted challenge.
Yeah. And I truly believe that no one has one perfect answer that is going to fill the needs of every employer and every kind of workplace. And in fact, we all have really different organizations, different companies that we work with, and we are stronger with all of that difference, with all of the diversity of thought and the diversity of ways that we do things. But because of that, there is not one pathway that will work for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that's really on both sides. There's no one, training program that if you go through this training program, you will absolutely be a fit at this company, period. Also on the learner side, if we're all individuals and we all have different strengths and different weaknesses. And thinking about it from that point of view, it's going to take a lot of different kinds of programs. So yes, trying different things, pulling at threads, seeing what works. One thing I've learned is not always will I have a good answer to the question about scale, about growing a program, because sometimes a program might need to stay small because it might fill a very specific need for a very specific type of person, and maybe that's okay. Does that mean that it's like a failure or that it's wrong or bad? No. It might just mean that there are other answers out there for other opportunities in other companies.
Yeah, so I imagine there is still that pressure, though, to grow, just like with any business, to scale, to grow. How do you feel like you resist that in the programs that, as you said, need to stay small because they occupy a specific niche?
Yeah, we're constantly learning. Right now, the answer to that, it's not a yes or a no for any of the programs that we currently run. I think they will all grow. They will all grow in different ways. That might mean, a different type of class for the in-person immersive program. That might mean, we run a cohort model for a fellowship program, but we cap that cohort at a certain number, and we can only run that program if we have a certain level of support around those folks, which just takes more money and more support and more employers that are willing to host, and just all of those different pieces have to fall into place. That doesn't mean that there's not room for growth. It's just, there may be different ways to scale either these programs, or they may kind of spur an idea for another program or another kind of trial. And that's what makes me think of this as kind of like an incubator of these programs, because we have this base of, support in that we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're running several programs. So that means we have a little bit of a foundation that allows us to try some new stuff, and to take a little bit more of a risk. And I think that's just what it's going to take to try and figure out whether some of these programs are the right fit.
What is the biggest risk that you personally have taken with the business?
I think one of the biggest risks that we all take is hiring. Because for us, and we're small, we've got like 5 full-time employees right now, a handful of contractors that we're really close with. But I think the wrong hiring decision or the right one can really change the course of your organization. And it's difficult. No one who will ever listen to this will ever not agree that hiring and talent is tough. And so I think that's just always a risk. I'm a little bit risk averse, I think, historically. So it takes kind of a lot for me to make a huge decision and take a leap of faith. And it really helps me to know that, again, we've kind of got this foundation, this base of support. We've got our board, we've got these programs that are running and they're very successful. That gives me enough of kind of, life vest or whatever you want to say, to then go and take a leap of faith and try something new.
I also very much relate to that as someone who is naturally pretty risk averse.
Yeah.
But I think, when you're in a place of leadership or, a founder, CEO, in your case, executive director,
right,
you really do have to become more comfortable with that idea of, okay, we're going to try this and it might fail, but if it fails, that's okay. We learn from it and go forward.
And the folks who are on my board who are entrepreneurs are the ones that have always pushed me in that direction. And I've learned so much from those folks about, this is why we exist, is to try new things. This is part of our mission, really staying in line with our mission and our values. But in doing so, not being quite as risk averse. Me personally, my kind of career story forced me a little bit into being a little less risk averse, because I lost a job early in my career And I decided to try freelancing and kind of jumped into this world of, against a bunch of stuff I didn't know how to do, figured it out. But by doing that one time and then years later doing that again, I still maintain an LLC. I still, kind of keep up with some of that sort of stuff. But I was forced into that. And I think if I wasn't, I would not be where I am today. I really don't think so.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, you don't even realize you're doing it until you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And someone recently asked me, do you feel like an entrepreneur?
Yes.
And I laughed and I kind of said, 4 years ago, definitely not. I felt like I was a person who said yes and who was figuring stuff out. Is that an entrepreneur? At the time, I did not think so because I didn't fit a certain, definition of that I had in my own mind. But more recently, yes, absolutely. I face so many of the same challenges and questions and that entrepreneurs do, and have been through so many similar situations and failures and successes. And you see all the memes and all the little charts of like the path of an entrepreneur, just very up and down and very messy. And I do identify with that. Do I, get as much out of some of the entrepreneur specific, training programs or offerings? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. But at the core, yes. When it comes to, how risk averse are you? Or how creative do you need to be? Or do you need your company to scale? Or just all of those kinds of questions. So I thought it was funny. And it was also the first time anyone had asked me that. And probably the first time I had said yes.
Yeah, someone asked me recently, what do you do for work? And I struggled to say the word entrepreneur or
Right.
founder. It's really strange. Like I said, sometimes you don't really realize that you're doing it until you're forced to look at it and assess, what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
So tell me how your mindset has changed specifically kind of within the realm of your business over the past 4.5 years. Like if you look back to, where you were at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
what do you wish you had known then that you know now?
I see it as just kind of a lot of little mindset shifts that I've kind of come back to time and time and time again. And over that time have changed my mind a bit. Typically for me, it's around permission. I think that coming from sort of my educational background, my career path, at first I was kind of waiting for someone else to give me permission to do whatever, right? Like to make a big decision and while certainly we have kind of processes in place, it's not like I'm out there making all decisions for our organization. We're very team-based. And of course I have my board, and try to involve, a lot of people in the big decisions. But there's this little thought around no one needs to give you permission to go and do the thing that needs to happen, whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
small or big, in this organization, and that no one else is going to do that. It is me. No one else is going to give me permission. I have to give myself permission. And again, I go back to I think that's because of the way I grew up and my educational background and my career, where I had been working in a lot of different companies that had many layers of, administration and oversight. And so I had always needed permission to do stuff.
Exactly.
And, over time now I find that really something that I find myself talk about to other people. Like, you don't need permission to go and try something, to go and do something. I really encourage, especially women, to try entrepreneurship because there is nothing special about me or my story or my path that meant that I could do this better than anyone else. That it just takes, drive and you just have to want to do it. If you want to do it, you can do it. You just have to figure it out. But not waiting, again, on somebody to kind of tap you with the magic wand and say, now this is what you are destined to do, and here is exactly how to go do it.
There's no roadmap.
There is
which
no
is
roadmap.
very liberating, but also deeply terrifying.
It's both. Yeah, it's both. And I do think that having done it a couple of times really helped me. For me, that's what I needed, is just to know that no matter what happens, everything's going to be fine, and that taking a risk can be really gratifying, really successful, or it can be a failure, and that you'll probably have both outcomes. And that ultimately that's how you learn and grow.
Yeah, well said. So wrapping up here, one final question for you. What do you consider a non-negotiable in your business?
Yeah. For me, and I would say for us as an organization, it is we stick to our values. We really spent some time determining what those were. And for us, when we say we value diversity, when we say we value opportunity, or we really value that our programs make an impact, we really stick to those things. We have ambition as an organization. We have goals as an organization, but we will never compromise our values to reach those goals. And that's where it comes back to hiring. Those values are part of our hiring process. They're part of our review process. They're just ingrained throughout our organization. And I'm super proud of that.
As you should be.
Well, and I'm proud of the team that we've created. And that has really become a lot of what I want to be as a leader. Is, of course, it's about the mission and the work, all the people we work with. But it has become also a lot about kind of supporting and encouraging my team and helping them get to kind of the next place in their paths and their journeys. Whatever, again, everybody's different, and we're big on that, an individual approach and a holistic approach to people. And so that has really become a big part of what I see as my role is supporting them, encouraging them, kind of keeping us all focused on those values, keeping us all moving forward, putting whatever structures in place are needed, are missing. But yeah, I think for us, for Build Carolina and for all of our programs, that's a non-negotiable. Like we will, only partner with those, only accept funding from those, hire those that are aligned with our values.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw it on your LinkedIn. I saw that you mentioned you're the anchor for people, and it sounds like Build Carolina is that anchor for the community as well.
I mean, that's what my hope is, that we continue to do that and to be that. One of our values is agility too, which is very intentional because we want to be able to shift and change as the needs shift and change, to kind of stay agile, to always be listening to what that need is. And so my hope is that we'll continue to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Leah. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, this has been the Founder Factor. Thanks for tuning in today. You can follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your content. Thanks. We'll see you next time.